Hello, you're listening to the Creative Connection podcast. I'm Jared, and I'm going to be your host through this experience. I'm recording 10 episodes, at least that's the plan ahead of time, 10 episodes for a pilot season of this podcast. The idea being we have 10 various creative guests on. We kind of talk about their industry, we talk about how they got there, we talk about themselves and the creative process. There's a large emphasis on this creative process. What is it? How does it differ between people and industries? And I'm really hoping we can have some really engaging conversations, create some connections with other creatives. That's kind of where I see the podcast going. It is the pilot season, so that the reason for that is, first of all, we need to see if people want to listen to it. If you're listening to it now, thank you. You're doing a great job. Continue listening. It's going to get better. On that note, it actually would be really useful. You don't have to do it now, but maybe at the end of the podcast, if you leave a review wherever you're watching it, wherever you're listening to it, rather, whether that's iTunes or various other podcast listening platforms. If you leave a review, preferably 5 stars, it's going to be so useful. It's going to be so useful to helping this pilot season take off. Hopefully it's something that people will want to listen to, and then we can go from there. The first guest I had today, Johnny Cochrane, really great guy, comedian, super funny, super talented, really charismatic. You'll know that from this conversation we had. I was really excited that he was up for doing the podcast, actually. More on that in the actual meat of the conversation. Writing for the Beano, had a stand-up show at the Edinburgh Fringe called Appeal. Voice of MTV, had a CBBC show called Johnny and Inel. I think he's also various hosts and writer for CBBC on those shows. Really just a powerhouse. I think the word I used early on in the podcast was the kind of guy fingering a lot of pies. Because he's just kind of out there doing everything when it comes to entertaining, and we had a really interesting conversation about comedy, almost as the industry, how he started, kind of advice, and the whole Edinburgh Fringe experience. So I'm really excited. I won't leave you too long. I'm just going to go ahead and we'll play it off, and I'll meet you around the back for a little sign off. Enjoy this conversation with Johnny. Johnny, hello.
How are we?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm really excited. So I don't know how I'm releasing these podcasts yet, whether in kind of what order, but this is actually the first one I'm doing, and I'm really excited that it's you.
Cheers.
Yeah, because you're great. I looked for a lot of your stuff. I'm going to come in and say I've done research on you. I don't know if that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, slightly.
A little bit uncomfortable.
A little uncomfortable.
I was up all night doing my research.
I saw you outside my house.
Yeah, well,
sitting there taking notes.
Yeah, you didn't even send me the address. I researched that, and I just turned up. Here I am.
And in turn, the local police have been researching you. So
yeah, but
good.
I don't think we need to worry about that too much. I think that's fine. But I'm really excited because not only are you really funny and I'm really entertaining and doing all kinds of cool stuff, which I'm excited to talk about, but also congratulations, but you're engaged with my cousin. So we're family.
Yeah.
Which is also really cool.
It's a family affair.
Yeah, this is like a family podcast now. So I think I'm really excited that you're the first one. For me, it just feels like extra special and extra exciting.
Oh, that's
is that cute?
It makes everyone feel warm. Yeah, I feel
that's
like
it.
A Care Bear right now.
You look like one. You kind of like glowing. You got that little heart patch there. It's a weird shirt choice. I didn't want to say anything, but that little heart in the corner. So let's get into some creativity stuff. This whole podcast is about creativity and the process and the industry. But you do a lot of things. I feel like it's a lurid description, but when people are like, all these fingers in lots of different pies, I think that sounds quite dirty. But I feel like that's kind of how I consider you. Because you've done, you do your comedy stuff, but you've done radio, you did TV a little bit. So I just think you're doing quite a lot of different stuff. Where would you describe yourself as do you have like, this is what I am? Like a description?
Well, first of all, let's go back to your description of fingers in lots of pies.
Right, you
That's,
you picked up on that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I mean, whenever I hear that phrase, I just imagine like a kind of sleazy old man going, "I've got a finger in all those pies."
It's a gross little phrase.
I know, and like even like the kind of genesis of that term, like. How did someone actually go, yeah, these are all my pies because I've put a finger in each one of them?
That's it.
What a nasty little pie-eating man.
He is, because as soon as his fingers are in that pie, no one else wants to go near him.
No, exactly. It's like when you were younger and you used to, lick things and say, like, get some sweets and go, licked it. Do you still want it? Do you still want it? Do you still want it? No, of course you don't. And then someone would go, yeah, now I've had it.
Yeah, so. I was the kid that would just eat it anyway.
Oh, would you?
Yeah, I was quite a large kid. I just, any food I get my hands on, I'm taking it. I don't care if you licked it. I don't care if it's on the ground. 5-second rule.
And would you also then suggest that was the same as you kissing them as well?
Oh,
we've basically got hold of each other now, yeah, because I've had a sweet that you licked. So should we do it for real?
Might as well. We're already there. We might as well.
This was before Tinder.
Yeah, so. That's it. Tinder changed that. No one's dropping food for me anymore. It worked every time.
But I guess to your initial point about what would I say I am, a citizen of the world. Jared.
Oh, cool.
No, I'd say...
How pretentious.
Yeah, I do eat lentils. And
right.
No, I think that overall, the term that encompasses it most would be a comedian.
A comedian, yeah.
Essentially, I do funny things in various different formats in the hope of eliciting a laugh from just even a chuckle from someone or many.
Preferably many, I assume.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm a bit of a Swiss Army knife, really. Comedian, presenter, actor.
Yeah, because you're doing a lot, and you're still doing a lot. You've done a lot. According to your IMDb, anyway. You might have fudged it. I don't know. But yeah, so you did 2 radio shows, right? One on Fubar and one on
Virgin Radio, yeah.
And then you had the whole Johnny and Inel Show. So you actually had like a TV show at one point.
Yeah, with my name in it.
You still doing that or nah?
No, we do work with CBBC still, quite a bit. Just filmed with them last week, actually. Which was cool, and it's more of a kind of an occasional hookup these days. There's a few shows that I still regularly work with, which is nice. But in general, I always felt, well, both of myself and Inel, my comedy act partner, we've both had the kind of idea that we started in adult comedy, and that's ultimately where we see our future.
Yeah, I imagine it's a very different contrast.
Yeah, it's a different discipline. Like, I think it helped us because we both came from either teaching backgrounds or working with kids,
right?
A background in working with kids. And so knowing how to censor yourself, police yourself.
Yeah, that comes like natural to you?
Yeah, it was certainly something that we learned in schools, so... Get your swear words out the way in schools, then launch your kids' TV career. That was our motto.
Is it easier to make kids laugh than it is adults? Because I feel like a lot of kids I see would just laugh at anything.
In some ways, I'd say it's harder.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. The thing about it is adults are a kind of homogenous group in the sense that once you reach a certain point in life, as an adult, you're of your mind. There are different peoples with different levels of intellect and different, levels of understanding of various different, kind of disciplines, like in terms of comedy. But with kids, being 2 years older can literally mean that you're a completely different, being. You're not necessarily capable of understanding certain things. Whereas a 36-year-old to a 38-year-old, they've both got an equal chance of understanding what you're trying to say. You're talking on the same level to them. So I think trying to find jokes to various different age groups within a child friendly arena will laugh at is difficult.
Yeah, I imagine that's really... Yeah, because the kids, you get to a certain point and then I think it's near the teenage, maybe like 11, 12, it's like, I'm not a kid anymore. So they almost force themselves into a different mindset. Like I don't think Pooh's funny anymore. I'm an adult. So yeah, it's trying to find. I imagine finding that balance is difficult. That's weird. I'd never even thought of that.
I mean, to go on record, I know a number of adults that find poo funny still.
Well, I mean, it is funny.
Let's not waste so much material that I have.
That's my next show.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just poo jokes.
I can't just tear all that material out of my book, but I think it's it is a funny situation like that in terms of their development, and absolutely with regards to kids becoming kind of teenagers and wanting to feel more mature, and so therefore trying to engage with more mature themes. And I mean, when we launched our TV show, I think that's one of the aspects we always wanted to kind of tackle, because the way we saw it is if we aimed for that kind of 12 between 11 and 13,
Yeah.
then in a lot of households, you're going to get 11 and 13-year-old moving up to school will be the older sibling or whatever. Now, if that sibling found it funny, then all of the younger ones from, say, 8, 7, 6, they're going to be like, I want to be like my older brother or sister with their level of, intellect and smarts. And I'm going to laugh along as well, even though I don't know what's going on. But that's because they have made this cool. That's how trends work in that age group. Basically, people see what other people are doing and go, oh, let me have a piece of that. Whereas I think that once you become an adult, you are much more of an individual and much more willing to take the burden of picking your own, likes and dislikes. So I think that I mean with Johnny and Inel Show, we actually I believe we created a show where, like many kids shows, will try to be two-tiered. So there'll be stuff in there for the kids and there'll be stuff in there for the adults as well that the kids won't get. But there was
gotcha. Yeah, I see that all the time on like Disney and stuff, especially. They always like sneak something in that's for the adults watching.
Yeah, Shrek.
And you just don't know until you get to that level of maturity, and you're like, "Oh, you cheeky little blighters."
Well, that was about sex.
I get it.
And The Simpsons was doing it all the time. But I think what we did with our show is we actually made it three-tiered, because there was stuff that both of them parents and kids could understand. There was stuff that just the parents could get, in terms of their age. And then there was also stuff that only the kids got. And adults would be like, we don't actually know what this is. They don't know why the kids are laughing. I think it's just kids not knowing what humour is, really. But actually, it was speaking to them in a way that, is a voice of the youth, basically.
Yeah, was that like internet memes and stuff?
It's more
what kids these days love.
Exactly. I mean, the stuff that the vernacular that, say, Roadman Shack was using, for instance.
Yes,
that was stuff we were doing a long time ago.
Yeah, right.
And we knew that it was connecting to people. Now, when we were saying it, we were doing like an urban dictionary of things,
Oh, I see, yeah.
And we were like, oh yeah, there's bear of this, bear of that, Oh, bear, meaning there are many. And,
right.
Now, kids are laughing. Parents don't know what that meant when we were doing it. They were like, what are these guys talking about?
That's really smart. That's really smart, though, to like go and do that research, but in such a... I think Urban Dictionary is a great shout of a way to go, because there's so much stuff that even I hear that I have no idea what that means. So if you do that research, you can like litter it in, and you're hitting that audience. How did you come up with that idea? Because I feel like that's a really good idea. I don't think I would have thought of that.
I think we the thing that happened quite naturally about when we started Johnny and Inel was that we'd just come from working with these kids. Now, I was working in a special needs school with kids with like behavioural issues. So some kids who were certainly completely disengaged with academia. They were never going to be high achievers in the education system.
Relatable.
Exactly. But I mean, these guys were also from inner city areas where, you could probably guess where they thought that they were going to end up, and many of them have, in all honesty.
Right.
But they would talk to me and some of the other staff on a different level, really. And it was quite funny and charming. But they didn't. They talked in the language that they live. You know, that's what they hear on the streets. That's how they would talk to us.
Yeah.
Which
I think in a way is nice. I really like it when people don't change like their discourse, the way they speak, like because a lot happens in power and stuff, like what kind of power you like, whether they're power above you or whether they're lower than you. Like you change the way you speak. I kind of like it when people are just real, just like this is how I talk.
I think that's really important, and I think it's becoming more important. So we were coming out at a time when, you know, kind of social media, YouTube was not necessarily in its absolute infancy, but it was nowhere near as developed as it is now. And the thing about it is back in the day when you used to have to wait for TV and radio to produce content for you that you would either choose to consume or not.
Yeah.
You really had very little choice between changing the channels or not engaging. Whereas now we live in a world where everyone is producing their own content, bunging it up online, and these people do not talk in RP. They do not talk, you know, like a BBC newsreader, because that's not the world that they live in. They reflect the world that they live in, and because they do, there's a bunch of other people who want to see someone reflecting the world that they live in, so they're going to go and engage with them.
Yeah.
We have a whole generation of people whose first thought when in terms of engaging with media is going to be going online and YouTube and whatnot. So that is where those formats have completely left the old formats like TV and radio completely behind.
There even was that switch with radio, I think even before that happened, where it used to be like, hey, I'm a radio DJ, I'm doing this cool radio voice. And that kind of switched to just become more natural. And I don't know when that was. I feel like that was before like YouTube and stuff hit big. But it's the same kind of thing. It's like people want genuine and realness. They want to be connecting with people. And when you're using this like pseudo personality that presenters and stuff, you know, have always used, it's harder to connect with.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a very simple one. People want authenticity.
Yeah, for real.
You need to project authenticity in the way that you show yourself, but also in all aspects of your work. Because who wants to see someone who's kind of faking it? You know what I mean? Like, that's not what the world is these days. Most people engage with media because it helps them either through or understand their own world. And if you can trust the person you're watching for being someone that you recognise, then you're much more likely to engage with it. Whereas, say the BBC, for instance, a lot of their output has been a projection of what they think that people should aspire to be, or what they should be pumping out from a moral point of view, because they don't want to be seen to be contributing to the degradation of society, you know, the dumbing down or the
it's very old-fashioned and like proper, isn't it?
Which is one of the reasons why I think in some aspects they've struggled, you know, certainly
definitely.
Up against you know, trying to take on social media and
because it almost feels just like out of touch. Like, I don't think they probably view it as that, because like, as you say, they're trying to be like proper and this is how people should act. But when you look at it and like you contrast it with someone on like YouTube or something, it does feel like really out of touch and almost jarring.
Yeah, and I think that the audiences out there can see that. Like, you know, I've been involved with some projects with major broadcasters, you know, where it feels like they're trying to force you into a role of how they perceive young people to act. And it's like, this isn't really what's going on. And if I know that, people watching are going to know that.
Yeah, definitely.
And you get found out. Whereas part of it as well, again, for this quest for authenticity, people back the little man these days because there's no censorship from them. There's no, you know, hidden interests or whatever. You know, someone sitting in their room talking to YouTube, certainly for the most part, this is true anyway, is not going to have to go, oh, I shouldn't say that actually because my sponsor, Coca-Cola, doesn't agree with...
They don't agree with that.
You know,
yeah.
they're not doing that. So and people want to hear what the real drilly is.
Yeah, but you say that, but then also on YouTube, it's such an advertiser like platform, and there has been a big shift. I don't know if you've been following it, but there was like what we on the platform called Adpocalypse, which happened a while ago due to various reasons, and then it kind of got worse and worse, and advertisers were pulling out, and so YouTube has really been making a push for like family-friendly content. So it is kind of trying to make people be this kind of like proper family-friendly, and it's trying to legislate almost what should be like a free platform where you should be real and just what you want to do, but because advertisers hold all the money, YouTubers need them to get it all working, that they kind of don't have anything, they can't do anything against it. They just have to be like, yeah, all right, we'll push family-friendly stuff.
It's very interesting you say that, actually. Like, it's a good point, and one that is inevitable.
Definitely.
The fact is that ultimately, as you say, the money brokers will always hold the power over these situations. Now, YouTube obviously makes money through selling advertising, but ultimately it's a valuable company because of how much engagement it gets anyway. But for them to keep making the kinds of money they want, they need advertisers, and advertisers don't necessarily want to be attached to some guy, you know, who's just being really explicit for the sake of it, but got loads of followers, because it might not match the brand.
Exactly. It's going to tarnish them. It's not going to be suitable for what they want.
So ultimately, you will find the internet stations after time starting to do exactly, you know, as you mentioned, where they go more, they want more control. They want more control over the people being promoted and whatever else. And so eventually the internet will start to become censored and regulated in a similar way to the TV used to be.
Yeah, I think so.
But then you'll always have splinter groups that will go, well, look at YouTube's old hat. This is what all the new people are doing, and now going to a new place. But basically what's happened at this time, for the first round of it, it's acted like a snow globe. Someone's shaking the snow globe up. So everything that was settled is no longer settled. The power structures have moved around a little bit. Within media, the new talent that's being promoted, the most profitable talent has gone upside down at times. Only a few people have managed to hold their standing. Yeah,
definitely.
Loads of new people coming through and really doing well. So, yeah, who knows how it's going to end up?
It's kind of, I think what you kind of touched upon is right. I think it's going to be like a constant circle of just new platforms being built to try and get away from this oppressing advertising. Because it's always, platforms going to need advertisers, but there's always also, like we've had for the last, like, I don't know, however long YouTube's been about, that period where it's kind of up in the air. Like, there's not any regulation on it. So I wonder if it's just going to always just circle back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, like, because we're starting to get onto the more broader subjects, really, of what kind of society we hope to live in and what one we envisage kind of coming about. Because, to be honest, I'm not really conservative in any walks of my life, really, and I wouldn't see myself as being kind of regressive with regards to technology or whatever, but there are aspects of social media that, to sound like an old guy, I think are really damaging and much worse than what the good old-fashioned family sitting around sitting around the TV.
100%.
You know, I do think that everyone should have the rights to explore what their own interests are, and, you know, not just force-fed, content which presumably has been cleared by the powers that be. It's good that people have a chance to get out and broadcast new ideas and broadcast. It brings new talent through in a better way as well. Makes it, I guess, more meritocratic. I don't always feel like that is the real case. I think that at times, the people that have been rewarded is lowest common denominator content. Really nothing to it. It's just someone who's willing to keep putting stuff out, you know. Yeah. It's that kind of, person who is on Instagram who takes really nice pictures, and you might go, oh, that's a really nice picture, as opposed to someone who takes a selfie with, 5 times along their journey to the tube station, but they've got more followers because there's more content going out and someone's engaging it.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Especially, I don't know how much you use like hashtags when you use Instagram specifically, but I've got to a point on my Instagram feed where I'm trying to like build it up for like kind of credibility reasons, and kind of like I'm making all this stuff, I need people to see it, so I'm trying to post pictures and I'm like hashtagging these keywords that I want people to go follow my Instagram for. So then you get the influx of followers that are there for the hashtag, and then they start to like drop off. So like the more content I make, the number keeps going off, but people dropping off, but I'm kind of like pushing that back up. So then if I just stopped putting posts, the numbers would just go down, down, down as people start to unfollow, because it's just that automated system. And I know that that's not really like, it doesn't matter. They're not going to be looking at my content anyway, but I feel like it's like the perfect analogy for that kind of thing. Like you keep making stuff, people keep seeing it, they keep following just because it's there. And every time you push something, someone has to see in it, and it's just building up that way. Whereas if you're just making it occasionally, no one's really, they can't keep in touch with it.
Absolutely. It's you know, one thing that hasn't changed is this whole game is about fostering your own audience, getting your voice out there so that people recognise you, recognise what you're about, and follow you as a person rather than just one little video that you've done. Because ultimately, depending on the video, they'll watch it a few times and get bored and then go, right, what's new?
Exactly,
If you're someone who they like your ideas, they like your production levels, your outlook, your humour or whatever, then that's the kind of thing where even if there's a video they don't agree with, they still like you and want to know why you. And that's what's kind of key to fostering.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing, and that's a big thing in everything you're doing. It's kind of like building the audience. Because I want to talk a little bit about your comedy show Appeal, when you did that for the Edinburgh Fringe. Because I think, dare I say, is that I feel like for me that feels like is that your only comedy show? I think that's the only one, like the biggest like headline show.
No, well, in terms of doing comedy, it's a different kettle of fish when you are doing. As someone who's worked with a double act partner for years, and worked in TV, radio, and whatnot, I was always, spread more thin with regards to stand-up. So whilst I've been a working stand-up for, years now, I hadn't necessarily come around to writing my own debut, like, solo show.
Yeah.
So that came quite late. I think I was 8 years in by the time I'd done my debut. And, it was great. I was really pleased to be doing that. But I guess with like Edinburgh shows, with shows in general, for me now, I would have to be feeling really passionate about doing it. I'm not the kind of guy to go, oh right, I've got the onus is on me to go up every year, even though I've got no ideas. I'm just reeling out a similar format. It's the quickest way to become irrelevant. Do
you think so?
Yeah.
Because the Fringe is like, that's the one for comedy. Like that's how a lot of British comics make it.
But this is, I think, what we're saying as well. Like in the podcast, things are changing now.
Yeah. Oh, so you think that's going to go as far as like for comedy as well as just like traditional media?
It's already here.
Yeah.
It's already here. Comedy was really hard. Comedy is now even harder.
Really?
It's a joke, and this is someone who's done quite well out of it. But it's hard. It's hard for anyone, starting out and getting to the stage where I am at my life, where you might be, you mentioned earlier, I'm engaged now, wanting to do other things. When you try to factor in how you are going to support yourself and possibly a partner, for chunks of time out of comedy, there's not that many people making a living strictly off of stand-up, like just working the clubs anymore. There's really not that many. There's a few people who've been going years and years who have that experience and those contacts where they constantly be working. There's plenty of professional comics who either have to get a side job now or have to look at finding other ways of making money. Luckily for me, my income's always come through TV, buttressing my wage, and radio and other avenues. Because if it wasn't, stand-up never would have been able to support me just on its own, really.
You don't think so?
No.
Have you noticed that transition happen while you've been working in comedy? Or did you kind of join it at the point where it already happened and it already was harder?
No, when I got in, it was... I went through the early stages where it was a free-for-all. And people were getting quite far ahead. Because it was basically around the recession. So I remember coming back from travelling, the recession had just hit. But once it just hit, everyone was like, well, what's going to happen here? Because you didn't catch it straight away. That's 6 months after, you're like, everyone keeps telling me there's a recession, but loads of cash in my pocket. Let's go out, Danny. Let's go out. But it caught up with us, didn't it?
Yeah, right.
And basically it caught up with the comedy industry as well. I think clubs started to shut. The less cash people had in their pockets, the less they were going out to watch comedy. A lot of them would just stay in, watch live at the Apollo.
Yeah. So do you think the advent of like internet and I guess to an extent like Netflix, which I guess counts as the internet, but people being able to more, I guess even like video on demand, just even being able to access comedy, do you think that has had an effect on people going out to see it? Because I would have thought kind of similar to the cinema or watching a sports game live, it's like you're going for the experience more for the actual comedy itself. But do you think people are opting to stay at home to just do it in the luxury of their own house, just to still get that kind of experience of watching something funny, but to not actually have to leave?
It's a tough question, really. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a few different factors kind of impacting on it. I think that one, it's economic reasons. So people just don't kind of have the cash.
Yeah, that makes sense.
To go out and because but overall, watching stand-up live is miles better than watching it on TV.
Yeah, I would have thought so. It's that kind of like atmosphere.
It is,
and it's everythin's funnier when you're in a crowd that's laughing.
Exactly. There's a science behind comedy, and that stuff is, very much, it's unarguable. Like stand-up is better live than watching it on TV. But people had to be more frugal with less money. In general, as we were talking about earlier, we live in a saturated market where there's so much content out there now for people.
Yeah, there is. And it's so easy to access.
I mean, before it used to maybe be, look, the Apollo comes on once a week, so you go and watch, the latest comedians on the Apollo. And if you like comedy, well, the only other place to really watch it is get yourself down to the local comedy club. Yeah. Now, go on YouTube and, you can do 24 hours watching stand-up from everywhere or hour-long stand-up specials on on-demand services. Yeah. All of a very high standard as well, So, yeah, it's just made it a bit harder for comedy clubs to keep going and comedians to keep going because those new comedy clubs that were being set up to deal with the overspill for comedy demand, back in the day, they closed down, which meant that basically all of the industry moves up and down depending on what nights and events are run to cater for comedy. So you got your top, if there are bottom feeders, there's top feeders. Now, the top feeders were maybe pushing into doing TV work, film, radio, because they'd reached a stage of with their comedy where they've got a following, they're well respected. Once TV starts to clam up, and everything does with lack of money, with austerity and whatever else, then the top feeders who are in TV go, right, now I need to go back to headlining clubs. The people who were headlining in their stead then drop down to doing middle spots, or open spots. Then the people who are just starting to get work out of comedy, maybe opening or doing the middle, they are now back to unpaid spots and so on. It has a ripple down effect. And the reality is if you're constantly gigging for no pay, there's only so long you can do it unless you're literally like... It
just becomes infeasible and also demotivating as well. Like even the most motivated people, when you're constantly going out for essentially nothing, It's got to hit hard, I imagine, right?
Yeah, it's a tough game, but I mean, I think most people get involved in comedy knowing that
I would have thought so.
they will be challenged.
Yeah, it's like a well-known thing. Like in comedy, you're gonna bomb. Like, and that's kind of the bar.
100%. But I mean, the difference is when you can run that risk in your professional life that I might die on stage here.
Yeah.
And that could happen any day, and you have to live within those boundaries of nervous energy. But then when you take that and add in the economic effect that not getting paid might have, and go, I might actually die in real life.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'm not feeding
There's
myself.
suddenly like a lot more pressure.
Exactly, and then suddenly the job's not cute. It's not fun, you know.
Yeah, because when you're that stressed about it, you can't be in like the mood set to be having fun on stage, and I imagine it just stacks up, and to the point where you kind of probably get depressed, I imagine.
Yeah, very easy.
Just
I mean,
overwhelmed.
there's a lot of drug addicts, a lot of alcoholics, a lot of, you know, people with kind of mental health issues involved in comedy. But I'm all right. So no, there's a lot of. It takes extreme characters in the comedy industry, and when you factor in all of those extreme characters with those, you know, kind of factors of the industry, it's a recipe for disaster, and people have breakdowns all the time.
Definitely. I think it's really interesting. Just all of it. I'm really like learning more about the industry than I've ever really like looked into, I think. And that's all about what the podcast is about. So so far so good. But I really want to delve into your creative process a little bit. And I think I want to do that for Appeal. But if you'd rather talk about the way you write the TV stuff or the way you act, I don't know. I'm saying you can do what you want. But I think Appeal would be really interesting. What do you think?
To be honest, I think in a way the creative process is always the same, really.
Do you think so?
Yeah. I think I've always been a creative person. Ideas have always come quite readily to me, and I think one of the only reasons I've been able to get this far, and if I have any hope of, you know, improving my stock in this game, what will get me there is ultimately my ideas and my ability to think out of the box.
This is what I think every time I wake up in the morning. I'm like, I have the same thought process. I'm like, I'm pretty good at what I do, but my ideas, they set me apart.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that's the key, really, and knowing that you can come up with things that other people can't, and being able to execute them as well, you know. I mean, I think whenever you're in a creative field, a lot of it really comes down to gaining credibility, not just for other people to believe in you, but for you to believe in yourself. Like, you might have a bit of inner belief, but that can only get you so far. If you've been going 5-6 years in comedy and no one's ever laughed, it's time to stop doing it, mate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or do it, but just don't even tell anyone you're doing it. Just come out there, die gracefully, get off, you know, but you're not going to make it. You're not.
Do you think there are like some like masochists that really just like going on stage and bombing, and so they just write the worst jokes they can to get that experience of just no one laughing?
I've seen some of them.
Have you really?
I've seen some of them. Some of them brilliant. I mean, there is a whole thing of anti-comedy where you can write an awful set, and you can also
really, that's like a genre. I could do that genre.
Yeah, but you have to know what you're doing. You can't just be bad. Like, it needs to be so bad it's good.
Okay, maybe not then.
Yeah,
I was just gonna go and be bad. That was my plan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of those out there, though.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, it's different.
Yeah. I think with regards to the creative process, it's more my I guess based on advice that I was given early on and my own experience, was that you should always work from a place of knowledge, of experience, in terms of, with comedy, write about things that you know, because in that kind of whole air of authenticity again, people know when you're faking things, people know when you're not being sincere, and it loses traction. Audiences have a great ability to do this, more than what an audience member would realise without a knowledge of the way that they work as a whole. You can tell, like, I mean, people would say things like, you know, they've worked out, the audience has worked out whether they like you or not within the first 6 seconds.
Yeah, they say that with like interviews and stuff as well. Just like immediately, just from like when people walk in, they're like, "Oh, I know what I think of you."
And it's not that you can't then turn it around, but it's much, much harder to have a good gig after they all think, "Oh, he's a twat."
How would you go about doing? Like, is that just how you walk, what you dress, what you look like?
Sometimes you're just going to get unlucky, and people are like, "I don't like him." That's the way it is.
That's me whenever I've met anyone in my life.
Well,
they're like, "Well, he's a bit of a dickhead." I haven't said anything yet.
Well, I mean, if you are someone who, basically anyone, it doesn't matter if you're Bill Burr or Dave Chappelle, there will be nights where they don't go well. It's simple. You can't pick your audiences all the time. The problem with those, the reason why they won't die very often anymore, is because they've got such a following that people know they get in and people come to see them.
I imagine that might be an advantage of internet comedians. Like if you're saying that's like a genre that's thing, people are like pushing their stand-up on like the internet and stuff, and if you build up a following on there, I imagine if you go to a show and they're all invited, the atmosphere is going to be a lot easier than like another audience that don't know you, right?
100%. I mean, they're cheering before you've even said a joke. They're going, yeah, we love this guy, you know.
Yeah, that's easy stuff, so maybe that's like the way to go.
Well, yeah, whereas stand-up on a weekend when you play a comedy club, people come in, they don't know who you are most of the time.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're like, go on then, make me laugh. I've paid my money, make me laugh. And if you ain't, you know, and if I've got enough of the audience with me, we'll come and have a word with you afterwards and say how rubbish you are.
Does that happen? Like, post-show heckling?
Oh, absolutely. You know, most of the time people don't want to say anything to your face because it's awkward for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you get a bad haircut and you're like, how does it look? Great. You're not going to say, no, it looks bad. No,
yes, it's shying away.
Or at least I'm not anyway. I pay for it every time.
No, I don't know. I mean, sometimes you get it, but I think the fact is if you start from things that you find funny, that's got to always be the key. And also based around your own actual experience, because you know how, when you start fleshing out ideas, you know the truth behind it because it actually happened.
Yeah.
Or you know how you felt, or you know the people involved, or you know this. So, you know, regardless of what the idea is, I think if you come from a place of...
So, when it comes to conception, do you carry around like a book with you and something happens and you're like, this is an idea? Or is it more, you're maybe like having a shower or something and all of a sudden you remember something and you're like, oh, that was really funny. And then you kind of have like a post event happening writing session. It just kind of like pops out of nowhere, like, oh shit, that was a moment. I should write a joke about that. Or is it literally in the moment you're like, this is going to be for a stand-up show?
It's changed over the years. When I started, like, you're in early days in stand-up are all about trying to find your voice, trying to find who you are going to be on stage. And that isn't necessarily you walking around, you know, who you're going to be. So you try a lot of different things out, you know, and you're also not sure what's funny or not. There are plenty of things I've said on stage going, oh, this is going to kill them.
It just doesn't.
People have to leave for the amount of tumbleweed in the room.
Oh,
no.
You know, it stacks up.
It's dreadful, yeah. They're building small houses out of the tumbleweed, in fact. With very little
impressive.
Thanks for the person who brought all the tumbleweed in. Now, I think that the as I say, with the early days when you don't really know what's funny, I used to just, and I still do it, really. I'd walk around, carry on about my day, and if something come to me and I thought, oh, right, that, then I'll just write it into my phone and then try and develop it at a later time. But often I'd forget about it and then turn up at a gig and think, right, what should I do? And then just end up with like bullet point ideas and then go and explore it on stage. That's
really interesting. For me, that feels like that would be the most horrific thing in the world, to go on with like a rough idea but nothing like proper set in stone, and then you're just on stage and you've got to try and explore it. I don't think I'd like that, but is that quite common?
No, you got to be good enough to be able to do that,
right?
But and that's why I now do it, but I wouldn't necessarily have done it before. I would have tried to develop it more, but
that's really interesting.
Yeah, because when you start doing comedy, you're a kind of a slave to structure, because you feel the weight of impending doom weighing heavy on your shoulders. Like, you're one bad joke away from dying on stage, the crowd turning on you, it becoming a bad experience for everyone. And you feel like the only way you're not going to do that is if you stick to the script.
Yeah.
Mofo.
It's like a safety blanket, the script.
Exactly. Oh, this script's worked in back in the day. As long as I see these words in that order.
It never failed me yet.
Yeah, but it does fail. And so in the early days, if someone shouts out anything, oh, you know, oi, dickhead or whatever, then you're like, back to the script.
Yeah, you know? you try and like slide back into it as casual as possible.
Exactly, because you're not confident going off and free-forming, free-flowing and improvising. But once you get to the stage, which I definitely am, at the stage where I can improvise, but more so I actually prefer to improvise a lot of the time.
Right, yeah.
Than stick to kind of script. Like, you have to... Anyone who thinks that comedians get up and come out with new jokes every week is delusional, basically. You have script, you have a club set, you know, which you may have like a pool of material that you can draw things from. But if you see someone twice in, you know, a couple of months, there's a good chance you're going to see some jokes again. That's how it works. You know?
Yeah, right.
There's not a whole new set getting produced all the time. But if someone does a shout out now, then I'm quite happy to go off and do 5 minutes on that person and come back.
You're right, and then you can just pull it back straight where you left off, pretty much.
Yeah, I'll take it somewhere new.
Yeah.
But that's just like... But that's what you train for. That's what it is. That's what it's about, you know. And even then, not everyone can do it very well.
Yeah, I can imagine. I imagine it's really like a finesse skill. Because I think, kind of like using an analogy for like rapping as well. Like, some people can write really, really sick bars, but then as soon as it comes to freestyle, it's like a completely different story. Because you just don't have it at the tip of your head. But you can delve into there, you can get like real metaphorical and real deep and stuff, but it's just not at the tip of your tongue.
Definitely.
I imagine it's exactly the same.
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that you can't really, it's hard to teach, you know. You have to practice it and get better at it.
Yeah.
Use that muscle. But I see it as more like you get into a little zone. I guess it's that kind of clutch moment that, you know, if you're a quarterback who's just been snapped the ball, or you're a football player taking a free kick or something like that, when you need to score.
Yeah, right.
It's just that moment of, nope, there's nowhere else to run now. This is it.
Yeah, you just got to go in. You got to do it.
Execute, exactly.
Yeah.
And staying calm and going, no, I am taking a free kick in my garden against my son. You know what I mean? Just taking all the pressure away.
Yeah, I get you.
And it's that kind of vein of thought of where if someone shouts out or you break your mode, you don't increase your nerves with the gravity of the situation, because you got to stay mobile and agile in terms of what you're coming out with, so you can be funny. And you know, so yeah, and I mean, that's something of learning to stay calm in the pocket is something that you have to, you know, you get better at, more experience, but also I think some people just have it better than others.
Yeah, do you think so? Because I feel like heckling is like, that's one of the big stereotypes as well, like get heckled. And I imagine a lot of people just deal with that in different ways. Like, as you say, some people just kind of like ignore it back to the script. You seem to like to jump on that and use that as like fuel, which I think usually works. I suppose it depends on the crowd. But from what I've seen, like when someone's heckling and then the comedian's like jumps in and like, you know, jabs at him back, and it's usually like well received by everyone else.
Yeah, because the thing about it is that actually I think that most audience members, and I don't even mean this that in that rude a way, I just think they're very naive with regards to what comedy is. They don't really understand what's going on. Like, they think they do, but they don't. It's kind of like magic in a way, you know. And,
yeah, right.
And they appreciate it for what it is, but they don't actually know what's going on. Like, oh, wow, a rabbit just got pulled out of a hat. Yeah, but you know that a rabbit's not in a hat, don't you? You're just going, yeah, great. Now, there are tricks of the trade with comedy to make things certainly easier, but in general, I've had people come up to me and be like, yeah, I mean, I love that stuff when you were talking to the audience, but, the rest of the stuff didn't sound like you was, kind of making it up or whatever. For words to that effect, it's like, yeah, but you're not making it up. If you think someone's going to come up here for 20 minutes in front of a room full of people they don't know and just talk about, stuff that they've been doing while they've been picking their nose, that's not going to happen. You have structured bits of material that you can get, the good ones can go off of. And the audience will always love the improvised stuff because they know it's being made up on the spot.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though some of the times it's not, because it's, at the end of the day, to be honest, if a comedian goes, oh, what'd you do? Oh, you're a teacher? Well, what you doing here? Getting all your time off school, blah, blah, blah. And people start laughing. It's like, yeah, it's because that guy's met 50 million teachers.
Yeah, it's got a generic job role.
So, yeah. But if someone goes, my name's, Xander, and someone comes out of a bit on his name, then you can rest assured that the geezer's made it up.
Right. He's not prepped for Xander. He's not got that in the bank. No. Although he does after that show.
Yeah.
So he's got that ready now. I want to see a comedian that gets like one of those baby birth books, like what do I name my baby? And that comes up with a joke for every single name. So he's super prepared for the hecklers.
Ready. And there'll still always be one.
Right, yeah, someone who's gone off the book. Yeah. There's rebellious parents. So when it came to so your ideas, you kind of based off real time experiences, and you say that's pretty common for most comedians, if not all of them. When it comes to actually writing, so let's say you're sitting down. We'll use appeal as the specific, just because it's a big deal. The Fringe is like a big show and it's the full length set. So when it came to writing that, did you kind of have like a library of jokes that you already had? Or what I'm curious about is the process, because when I come up with ideas, it's usually like I'm just, I'm at the gym or something, I get one idea and I'm like, oh, that's sick. And then I just go home and I go write. Do you like force yourself to sit down to write like a set? Or is it kind of like over like process, you get a spark, write down, a couple of weeks later, you get a spark, you write it down? How does that process go?
I mean, if you're talking specifically about a show, everyone does it differently. Like, some people are relentless. Some people see comedy like a job. They just do it like a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, I think, fair play to them if they've got that level of kind of endeavour and discipline. But I haven't got that.
So what do you do then? Or what did you do? Do you still do comedy shows, right?
Yeah, but I mean, in terms of having an actual show, I wanted to work off of something that, one, I found funny.
Yeah.
Two, that I would feel, bearing in mind you do Edinburgh, that's 28 gigs.
Yeah.
Every single day of the same show. It gets boring.
I can imagine, yeah.
But not only does it get boring, but you've got people coming in judging you who might come in the last week. So if you're playing bored, then they're going to go, this show's lazy and bored.
You got to keep up with it. You got to stay energized.
Yeah, you got to stay passionate about it. So I wanted to do a show that was going to interest me.
Yeah, okay. So that's a big part of your writing. It's like, I know this needs to continue to engage me.
No, not necessarily. This is what I mean. The shows are different. So it's like saying, asking Ricky Gervais how he wrote The Office and how he wrote Extras. It could be completely different muses. They're different things. But for that show,
let's just talk about that show specifically, just so things don't get too confusing.
I think I wanted something that was going to be, going to interest me because it was my first one of doing it. Yeah. One that I thought would be unique.
Okay.
And no one else was going to be doing something like that, and they weren't.
Because your big thing was like the whole, you had like a video in the background, right? So you were using like video stuff. Is that the kind of what you're implying?
Well, no, I was using... there's a few comedians use video, but not many of them show a video of their own mugging in the middle of their Edinburgh show.
Yeah.
That was new. That's what I did.
That's the first time?
Yeah.
Why do you have video of that?
Well, I got my Crime Watch up. It went out on Crime Watch.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it still like CCTV then?
Yeah, off the bus. I'd fallen asleep drunk, and some geezer nicked my wallet. And so basically I told the story about that, but I also broke down the way that they describe it on Crime Watch and the way it got dressed up, and it's actually not based completely the way that they try to garner sympathy, but in reality it's like, no, this guy's just a bit of a pisshead, really. Yeah, did that. It was a bit of audience engagement. So I tend to work with all of the things that I do off of visions. Like I have a vision of what it looks like, or how it sounds, and then I work towards that.
Sure. Okay. So
and nothing's as clear as the vision that I end up having at the start.
Really? So that's the beginning of your creative process. It's like, this is what it's gonna look like.
Yeah, I see things. I see things, and then
that's interesting.
When I see them, then I go about making them real, or maybe even having to convince people of why that would be good. But it's quite frustrating sometimes, because often if you've got a big idea and a big vision, it's not always easy to just tell someone what it is. So with regards to that Edinburgh show, some of the stuff I was throwing in there when I was speaking to my manager and agents and stuff, they're like, yeah, like they're not getting it in the initial. But
because from what I read, because I hadn't seen the Edinburgh show, but it was quite like interactive. You had like these cards. Is that right? Was that for the actual show, or was that for like your pre-shows?
No, that was...
Because I watched some clips, and you had like these like cue cards kind of things, and that was like a big part of the comedy, big jokes, and then you had that screen behind you that was playing off videos and stuff.
Yeah, I think the whole point of the show, it was that I had, I certainly believed that I had found the formula, if you like, Neo's code.
Yeah, right. I saw a bit about that. Yeah.
Creating a hit Edinburgh show. And so the cards were little more than a checkpoint that I had to keep.
Yes, right.
To keep going through. Once I got through all of those, then I would have nailed a perfect Edinburgh show.
Yes.
So
this was part of your vision. Like, you knew you had these checkpoints, and you're like, I want to roll through all of these. It's gonna be great.
No, because I saw it more as a story of the show, and then once you have an overall idea of what you want to do, you go about finding the tools to make that come about. So I always had an idea about the cards, but I didn't know how they'd link up at one point.
Yeah.
And then because in my year before I was going to do an Edinburgh show, and I didn't have time, and I hadn't learned all the jokes that I'd been writing for them. So I was going up on stage with these cards.
Right.
I was going, look, guys, some of these... basically, I was meant to do an Edinburgh show. I'd booked in some previews. The show fell away. I was not in a good place to be doing it anyway.
Yeah.
But then I had these Edinburgh previews for a show I was never going to do. So I went, I'll just go and do them and try some material out. So I went on and started doing these cards. And I was like, right, these might be good. They might be rubbish.
Yeah, that's really meta.
Yeah, and then reading off the jokes, and some people were like, that is really cool what you did with the cards. Like, do you always do that? And I was like, no, I just haven't learned these jokes.
Yeah.
And then, but I think one of the biggest bits of advice I give to anyone who wants to get in this or creative, in like, be receptive to what other people say, because a lot of the time you're going, oh, how am I going to make people laugh? And then, or how am I going to make people engage with what I want to do? And then they'll come up to you and go, oh, do you always do that? They might not always go, this is the best thing you ever do.
Yeah, right.
They'll talk to you in a way, they'll ask you a question about something. If someone's taking the time to ask you a question, it means it's something more important than just, elevator chat. So listen to what they're saying. And if two people come up to me out of not that many people, at a preview and say, the card thing's amazing. The card
thing. So people are really latching on with that as like a concept.
Yeah, so then I'm like, do the cards.
Yeah, I mean, if it's working, it's working. So that idea, so that was... Yeah, so you had that before you were writing this show. So the cards thing were kind of always there.
They were, but the first idea was the story of how the show would go.
Yeah, okay, like an outline.
Yeah, like I had an idea, a concept for a show of what would happen,
Yeah.
and then you have to start then trying to put meat on the bones.
Sorry, but how does that work when you say you had you have an outline for a show? Does that mean you then write jokes around that outline, or did you already I know I have these jokes that work, so you kind of put them into an outline ahead of time?
Both.
A bit of both, yeah.
Like you can. There are some jokes that I've been doing for a while that I involved in my Edinburgh show because I knew they were good jokes, and I thought you got to put some bankers in there,
Yeah.
And most people would do that, but then there's other bits where I'm like, right, I need to get from here to here. In terms of content, so what am I going to come up with to bridge the gap? So yeah, it kind of went about like that, really.
So I always find that interesting. So with the situations like the latter specifically, that must have been a place where you're like, I need to have a joke here, but I don't have that initial idea because it's something. It's not like a sudden spark in reality. You're like, oh, here's a joke. It's something that you need a joke for, but you've got to try and come up with it completely fresh. So you must have to literally sit down with pen and paper and just try and rack your brain about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the stuff that I'm still not good at yet. Still not great with now in terms of having the discipline to do that.
Right.
I can write jokes about anything if I need to. But
yeah, I imagine all your TV script writing and stuff helps with that specifically, or maybe vice versa. I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, I think I've naturally got a flair for some of this stuff, so I've always risen to the challenges that get set for me. But I'm not great at just doing things off, my own back, just trying to go, oh, let me just sit there and do a day of writing for something that's not getting me paid. If someone pays me to fulfill a task, I will do that quite comfortably because I know what I have to do. For me to be not getting paid with no one telling me to do it and just sit down and write loads of stuff,
yeah, I
don't really respond very well to that, and I often won't do it.
You find it quite easy to get distracted even if you started it.
Absolutely, and I kind of don't see the point of it. Right. Some people work for the sake of it. I don't do that. I need a focus, otherwise I won't bother. Yeah. I don't see the point.
That's interesting.
It's not necessarily the best way of going about it. I get frustrated sometimes with myself, but yeah, I just can't be bothered. I'm not going to waste my time. How many people just throw stuff at the wall, And I don't want to be someone who's wasted their time coming up with things that just never go anywhere. Yeah,
it's not wasting though, because you're using skills to come up with those ideas and even just to develop them a little bit.
Maybe, but I also think that one of the things I said about comedy is you put to kind of put it into a metaphor. There are so many bullets you've got in the chamber, right? Say in a revolver. And each bullet might be the final nail in your coffin in terms of motivation to keep achieving what you want to be doing. Now, there are loads of things out there that will give you a big slap around the face and stop you from doing it. And some people could be like, I'm going to keep going no matter what. Yeah, okay, but you're probably the person on X Factor trying to get through and become world famous when you're shocking and no one else can see it. I'm not that person. I never have been. I am doing this because I think I can do it and I think I'm good enough to. But ultimately, there are only so many setbacks that anyone can take without having to reassess things or come at things in a different way. And maybe that's taking time away and whatever. So for me, I try to limit the amount of negative setbacks I will get. So if I spend a day completely exerting all my energy into something, you're putting stress on yourself. Yeah. That if there's no hope of a payoff or limited, that's lottery stuff, which for me, I've always been more about being a bit more calculated with my exertions. Yeah, right. So you're trying to work smart, not hard, as the saying goes. Yeah, exactly. And it's, and that's with a view to being in it for longer rather than... So so it's kind of like a drag race. Like some people can gas off at the beginning. I suppose even the tortoise and the hare to an extent. It's like if you use all your energy ahead of time, you get too complacent or burn out. Okay, and then you're just right, I got nothing left. Whereas you're kind of
I'm going to be doing this.
Yeah, and loads of people in comedy, like, I remember when I was starting, and there's loads of people who are there going, you know, oh yeah, I'm up to doing like 5 gigs a week. I'm gigging every night of the week and this and
right. And that's like a red flag, you think? You're like,
well, I'm just like, no, that's up to them if they want to do it. But for me, I'm like, why do you think you're getting better just because you gig that much more? Like, if you're talking about are you better than someone who gigs, you know, twice a year, of course you are. You're getting experience. But once you reach your minimum level that you need to do to be gaining experience, it doesn't mean that more is more, you know.
But what about the whole like 10,000 hours theory, where it takes 10,000 hours of practice to master something? Surely then they're getting closer and better every time.
Well, that's the whole point. But I think that my thoughts on that whole issue is that there's no reason to say if I'm sitting at home, I'm not also putting work into it. Because I'm thinking about
that's
things.
it. I mean, that's it. You are, if you're a creative minded, you're always thinking about stuff.
And the thing is that when I have ideas, they often just seem to just be there for me.
Yeah, that's it.
But that's because I give myself a lot of time to think about the way things are. I stew over things quite a lot.
Yeah.
But if I was in a club just constantly trying to chuck another joke out there, would I have the ideas ready to go for something that was worth going? I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I wouldn't even have the motivation because after a while, I've put all this work in,
Yeah.
and nothing's gone my way.
Right. So you think if you did all that work and then nothing works, you'll be more tempted to like quit.
Yeah.
Right. I think that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is that when it comes to writing specifically, you're more of a ideas are going to come to me rather than you pushing for the ideas. So what I mean by that is rather than you know, 8 till 10 sitting down with a pen and paper trying to come up with new ideas, you're kind of like, I know ideas are going to come to me, you know, I'm kind of observing, I'm kind of living, and when they come, I'm just gonna write the best fucking joke I can think of.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you're saying, but I wouldn't necessarily say that is who I am really. Like, I can do both. It's just that I will naturally. It just makes it sound lazy, but I'll naturally do kind of as little as I need to.
Okay.
On an average project kind of thing, unless it's a properly funded project or something that people,
that's different.
Had hope of going somewhere. If it's just me throwing stuff at the wall, then I'll do what I need to do. And in terms of writing comedy, there are some days where it comes to you, there's other days where it ain't, and I'm not worried. But if I had an Edinburgh show,
yes,
I'd be more likely to sit down on certain days and go, right, now I have to.
So this is what you presumably you would have done then when you were writing.
Yeah, there were times when I forced myself to write more readily, but I'm not sure it leads to you writing better stuff. You just come up with stuff that's probably at a slightly lower standard, but there's more of it.
Yeah, okay. So that's probably how you dealt with the whole, I need a joke here, but I don't know what is going to work, just to try and fill it out. So that's kind of how you're writing the whole show. What about the whole kind of like, when it came to like production, how much production do you have to do for that kind of show? Because you had this like screening stuff. How did you deal with that? Did you have to have one video, or did you have a tech guy and you're like, this needs to play here and here? Because I don't know how that will work. So are you kind of like organising the whole show?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had the idea. Ultimately, I will be directing it, and I would be, certainly with the help of my managers, who I would explain what I want to do, and then they would know and then help direct it. There were several videos, some of them that have to be pre-shot before you can even think about doing it, collating other videos, editing it together, making sure that it can play in one kind of motion. And then your tech man needs to get in touch with the show, see it, how it's meant to run, and be able to do things at the right time and whatnot. So, yeah.
Do you find that there's really any merit in practicing on your own? Or if you're going to practice a set, is it like, I'm just going to go and do this in front of people? If you're talking about practicing it before you've gone up, little point.
Yeah. You need to get out there. For anyone who's thinking about getting involved in comedy, you've got to just give it a go. there's not much you can learn from. I remember when I first started doing comedy, the first like set I wrote, it's just it makes you cringe now, but you know, I had ideas of like, I was like, this is how it's going to go. So I was like, you know, I'm going to walk to the mic and be like, I know you're thinking, oh, I'm going to tell a joke. Why don't you guys tell me to joke?
Yeah, classic.
You know, exactly. And then I'm like, and then the crowd will be laughing. Then I'll go into something else. It's like you create an idea of what's going to happen. That plan for that set went out the window within 10 seconds.
Really?
Well, the crowd are going, well, obviously we're not laughing at that. That's not funny.
Exactly.
You better have more in your locker than that.
You just like walk off stage again.
Exactly. This is going to be a difficult 5 minutes, and it was.
Right. So did you bomb the first time you did, or was it all right?
No, I didn't, to be honest. I mean, some of the jokes were shocking, obviously, but I think I got out of my first set what I needed, which was that my gig was not so bad that I didn't want to do comedy again.
Yeah, I imagine that's quite a big thing for new comedians.
There were shoots of life.
Right.
And I thought, you know, that was daunting. Obviously, before I went on, I was like having a panic attack. I was like, I don't know what I've done here. I'm not doing this. But I did it, and I was like, that ain't actually that bad, to be fair. It's all right. So I thought I can do that again now. And it took a while, because I started comedy with a year's gap in between.
Really? Right.
I did it my first gig, and then I was like, oh, I actually think I wanted to try it, see what it was like. And I was like, I can actually do that. And then I was like, but to be honest, I wanted to go travelling at the time, and so I thought there's no point in throwing myself into it, then I'm going to go travelling and break all this up. So just don't bother again until we come back. Then when I got back, I started it back up.
Yeah, that makes sense. You didn't try any abroad? Try and hit those foreign language barriers?
No, I stayed away.
That's too much pressure for your first set, for your second set. But
yeah, my second set was over a year after my first.
Was it the same, or did you write brand new material for that?
Oh, well, I mean, if anyone walked away from my first gig and thought, hey, you've completed comedy, just keep reeling that
I can't wait to hear that again next year.
Yeah.
That was solid. Take it to the Fringe.
I skated through my first gig, so my second needed a freshening up.
Right, okay.
And that was appalling as well. So.
Really, yeah. So it's just like a constant grind, just like you're going to be shit. You just get better and better each time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Practice makes perfect.
Pretty much.
Writing makes perfect. Because Ryan, how much... I was thinking about this the other day, right? I was watching... I don't know who it was. Some kind of comedian. I was thinking about like... started writing, so I was like watching a lot of comedians on YouTube and stuff, so I was watching a fair few clips. How much do you think, in terms of performance, it matters if the joke's that funny? Because some people are so like charismatic and like flamboyant, like the way they dance around stage, that I think even if they weren't saying anything, it would probably still be funny. So I was really just like, I wonder if this person could probably just say the worst joke and people would still laugh, just because it's just performed in such a solid way. How much do you think that has an effect on it, like performance versus like actual comedy? 'Cause I suppose it's versing a really funny joke that's just delivered like dead, because that's not gonna land still, even if the joke is like the best joke.
Yeah, but you're kind of separating and yet conflating two issues at the same time.
Right.
Like, first of all, comedy is, you know, things that make you laugh. But stand-up comedy is a part of comedy in a broader sense. But the idea that someone who does stand-up has got weaker material, but the way they deliver it is so good that it gets a really good response. The idea that that's somehow less worthy of praise than someone who's got good jokes and no performance skills, why?
Yeah, I see.
You know, at the end of the day, and I do think that there's a level to that. If you're just coming out with, like, there's no jokes in what you're doing at all. But Russell Brand, for instance, I watched him before I started doing comedy, and there are some bits of Russell Brand's stand-up that I have found funny, one or two. But I don't really think he's a great stand-up at all, to be honest. But he's an excellent performer.
Right.
He's very charismatic, and when he done Ponderland, for instance, I thought that was his perfect format where he shone to a really high level. Stand-up, I don't think he really did. He just had a massive following, so he could sell it out. But I didn't think there were any jokes there. But in general, there are people with not much material, but they're absolutely hilarious because it's the looks that they give or it's the way they do. There's nothing wrong with just that being what you do. As long as you know what you're doing, there's no kind of high art and low art here.
I suppose, you're just trying to make people laugh. How you get there doesn't really matter as long as you do.
And you find a lot of comedy snobs going, oh, no, I don't think they've gone through the right process there. It's like, no, they're funny and you're not. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of comedy people who seem to think because they're really studious of the art, they're somehow more entitled to be funny or more knowledgeable. It's a nonsense. Like, it is an art form for me. So just because you've gone round to loads of art museums don't mean you can paint like Picasso. Sometimes you either have it or you don't have it.
Right.
You know, it's not just a science. It's like there's both. So.
Yeah, I get that. I think it's very intricate, this whole, I think it's a lot more intricate than almost I thought it was. I think this has been quite an eye-opening experience just talking to you about comedy as a whole. Because in my head, this was like, let's talk about creativity, your process, how you get there. But I feel like we've really just spoken a lot about the ins of the industry to an extent that I don't think I would have even thought of prior to this.
Well, this is a different kind of generation that we're in now. And when I started doing comedy, it's the gift and the curse with this oversaturation of media, because it was my kingdom for some advice on how to get into the whole industry and how to get started. I guess people used to be protective of their roots in and their processes and stuff like that because they didn't want more competition. But I'm always like, no, I tell people with the way things go down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to stop short of, getting them loads of work because I'll probably need it. But in general, I tell people how to get there because if they can be that good luck to them. But when I started out, it was very hard to work out how was the best way to go about any of this,
Yeah, and I imagine it's quite personal as well, like per person. I'm sure there's this is the way, but then it differs to what exactly your goals are, who you are. What I'm curious about now, we've talked in depth. We've spoken about appeal and the Edinburgh Fringe. How much do you think your creative process differs when it comes to now writing a sketch when you were writing Johnny and Inel? Was it kind of similar, or was that more structured? Because you spoke earlier about how if there's monetary value, or if there's a project that has value, it's gonna be big, it's gonna be important, you're more committed to working and writing down and stuff. So was that more of a process of I want to do this sketch, this sketch, this sketch, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write them all, then we're going to rewrite them all, and we're going to go through like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you don't mess around in terms of that you're held to higher standards. If people say you can't do this, you can't do it. But I would also always attack it with the same kind of mentality in that I want to get out what I find funny. Now, it might not be the archetypal bit of material that you would find funny, like the funniest thing, but it's I have to now, for instance, I was writing for kids, I would write something funnier for an adult, that I would laugh at. But this is for kids, but I'm gonna write it as far as I can go within the realm of kids that I would find funny.
Yeah.
So you always do it like that, and then there are still things that people come back and go, you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that. And then you strip it back, and then you go, and then you're always trying to hang on to what you find funny out of that, But yeah, no, it's more. You have to stick to tighter formulas, I guess, with sketches, in terms of when you're writing for TV and probably new media. I studied this at university, and I remember thinking, there's loads of certain disciplines and production techniques that you learn and go, this is how it has to be, And I used to think, why does it have to be? You know, maybe I'll be a maverick and be out there and doing something. But, you know, when a doctor's studying medicine and they're going, yeah, this is how it has to be, you have to go, why does the heart have to be there? Maybe I could put it in their thigh. You know, like, it's that way for a reason. It's not just because it's a joke. So in terms of the, you know, the format of a sketch or whatever, there's well-trodden paths for a reason. It still means you can be creative with how you construct it, but you're not reinventing the wheel. No one's asking you to. So
is that easier to write than your stand-up because there is that structure in place?
Yeah.
You find that easier?
Definitely. And in many ways more enjoyable as well.
Really? Well, why is that? Just because you're more like in the zone almost. It's quite. I feel like when you're writing stuff that's got no like structure, it's kind of like it's easy to be floaty and get distracted.
Well, I think that with stand-up, it's a longer process. It's harder to get that satisfaction back. So if you write something you think's funny, then you have to go to a club to test it out, and then some of it's funny, some of it might not be. Then you got to change this, and you got to then change that, test that out. Whereas with sketches, it's more, does this work? Send it over. No, I think that's changed, you know, and it's easier to just see it in front of you, and ultimately where you see it is what you're producing.
Yeah, I see. So you were doing like acting on that as well. For Johnny and Inel Show specifically, so you were writing and you were acting. How much were you like improvising when you were acting? And do you think that had like an effect on the overall comedic effect of the entire thing? Do you think it improved it if you did?
I mean, in my first season of doing it, like it's amazing how we even got through it to the standard we did.
Really?
That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, the kind of opportunity I had was a
big project.
One.
Yeah, big project.
At that stage and at that age, I had a big opportunity there, basically, and you know, I think I'd done a really good job of that, and I think a lot of people wouldn't have. And this, in terms of the second year, we were very much encouraged to go start improv classes.
Yes, I've heard that that's really beneficial for like a lot of that, like on camera stuff.
I'd say in terms of doing comedy, probably all sorts of comedy, but certainly stand up. Doing improv comedy has been the most important thing in terms of a class or lessons to be learned that I've ever done.
Yeah.
Without a shadow of a doubt. It's not even close. It's helped me so much in terms of that idea of staying in the pocket and not panicking. That came via improv. Yeah,
because you kind of get thrown into the situations where you have to just be like, right, now you have to do a joke and everyone's watching. It's kind of what you're here for, and you can't really get away from that kind of. So you get more natural, and
yeah, I mean,
the sweat stop.
Doing improv comedy, like literally every week you show up and you don't know what's going to happen, and you can't panic in that moment anymore because that's all that there is. And once you've done that, a whole show that is completely improvised, and you're going to do that, then coming up with things on stage isn't as hard, really. It's just
it's just the same. You're kind of stretching that muscle out.
Exactly.
Just being like quick on your toes, quick on your feet, ready to jibe if you need.
And since I started doing that, it's been good basically.
And how do you feel about the radio? Do you think that had like a similar effect in terms of like improv and stuff? Because I found that when I started doing like YouTube and stuff, my overall improv skills improved because you're there to be funny and you kind of like you're reacting kind of to other people and you're just trying to do that. It's like an hour of just trying to react, for example. Was this pre or post improv classes, the radio show?
It was post.
Right.
I think what you're probably talking about in terms of improvising, like the idea, like improvising on its own is not, it's a very broad brush. Like people improvise every day. A carpenter improvises if he hasn't got, the right tools. But the kind of improvising you're talking about there, anyone can do, and you can do at a kind of lower standard, at a younger age, for instance. You're someone who can go in without necessarily knowing what they're going to say and roll with a conversation. But the improv that you're getting from doing those classes and from stretching that muscle it's not about being able to do it. It's about knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it to execute what you need to do. So this isn't just, I had a conversation, I was cool for, 5-10 minutes. It's knowing where you are when you need to come up with something. So staying calm in that moment, knowing the kind of skill set and tools that you've got to get to navigate you through that situation, the words that you can say, just the ability to keep talking without panicking.
While you're trying to think as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see.
And knowing that that's what you're doing is
it's kind of like multitasking.
Yeah,
I definitely feel that with like the radio show stuff. It's like I'm jumping into this, I haven't thought about it, I got to talk, and that's still somehow work out where I'm going with this next.
But I mean, I guess what I'm saying is it's more like doing the same skills is one thing, but knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it. That you've got more of a mastery when you know what you're doing, why you're doing it for.
So do you think? It sounds like you think improv classes is a good shout.
100%. They're really, really good.
So how much do you think? I feel like it probably has quite a big impact on a lot of things. Do you think just doing an improv class will have like an impact on like someone who wasn't trying to like be a comedian, just like someone just living?
100%. I said that all the time. I told my mates and
really,
different people to get involved in. I just thought, even if you got an office job, if you work in, different corporations or whatnot, it's good for you to be able to be open with how your train of thought works. This is what I mean about having that knowledge of what's actually happening and why you're doing it, because you don't really realise how your brain's working until you start unpacking these things, and that's one of the ways you get off the tracks of doing your train of thoughts going the same way. It's being able to know what's happening and why you're doing it, so then you can plot a new path. And I think that having that audibility, that ability to adjust in terms of thought is good for anyone, any walk of life.
I would have thought so. Even just like, do you ever get it? You probably don't actually. This is very much like the wrong person to be talking about this. But sometimes I'm not really like paying attention. I'm just like walking along the street or something, and someone says something to me, but my brain's like kind of half asleep and it doesn't really know what's going on. So they like, I don't know, they say, "Oh, I like your shoes," and I kind of look up and I'm still not really sure what's happening, and I hear the last word and I'm just like, "Shoes," and I just repeat it at them. Like that's like the solution I have is just to open my mouth. But I wonder if I were an expert of improv comedy, my brain would like be ready to just be like, "Oh, thank you. These are cool shoes, aren't they?" Like I'm more prepared for that kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of thing. That is kind of certainly in a roundabout way what I was saying. Like there's a technique that you learn very early on called the yes and. Yes,
I've heard of this, and also it's great.
Whatever someone says at you, you're like, yeah, yes, and you add to whatever they are. So they go, I know you're a frog. Yes, I am. And I'm also the biggest daredevil frog that there is out there. And so you're, again, thinking whilst you're delivering.
Yeah.
But you're also, once you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, you are resting in that moment of, yes, I am. So it's, understanding that kind of train of thought. But yeah, no, it's advisable for anyone.
You think it's going to be useful. Overall, in terms of your creativity and what you've been doing, because obviously you've done so much. What do you think has been like the most important thing you've done so far in terms of your creative growth, or even I suppose your professional growth? Like, what do you think has been like the biggest task or show or job that you've had yet that's been like
the biggest project
useful, and just like for your own development, like the one that's pushed you the most, the one that's pushed you the hardest, the one that you really think you've improved because you had?
I think everyone's path's different, but I think ours was certainly that, even to this date, the biggest thing that we've had was the Johnny and Inel Show, because most people go their whole career and they don't have their own show.
Oh, definitely,
that they write and, you know, star in and you know, have that much kind of swing over. And the fact that was virtually, you know, my first TV gig of note, you know.
Yeah, and it's like you've got your name on the show.
And we were in at such the deep end, and so much so that, you know, most people wouldn't even dream of giving people like us opportunities like that now. But
and what you were saying earlier, well, I don't mean to cut you off, but I feel like we just touched on to something we were saying before the podcast, when you're like, you kind of, your whole career you've been working up to get to this kind of like mainstream point. Like you finally made it big in the mainstream, and then you had that moment where you looked around you and you realized the world had changed and now new media was what's hot. And it's kind of like you finally got to the end goal, and all of a sudden everything had changed. How frustrating was that? Or is it? Or was it still like, this is, because it's still sick. Like, I don't think that takes away anything in terms of like how cool that is that you had that show and that you did that.
I think the biggest thing for us was the fact that no one can take it away, and I can always go, if I'm an old man, I go, yeah, I'm my own show, and
because it's always going to be incredible, and it's always going to be one of those things that you can just pull out at a dinner party.
Exactly.
That's going to impress people.
And we've done a lot of those things now. You know, it weren't just flash in the pan here, gone tomorrow. Been around for a while, but it is frustrating because I think that my perception was always, if you get a chance and you do a good job, you'll stick around. But we did get a chance, we did a good job, and then, like you say, the world's just moved on a little bit, and now the routes that we used to go down are not really there in terms of, you know, progression on TV or different formats. Like, in terms of new content, most of it's coming through self-made social media platforms. So, you know, but as the old adages go, it's adapt or die, and if you can't beat them, join them. So
that's in the books then.
Watch out, Pete. Watch out.
The little teaser.
Yeah, exactly. There's going to be a video coming to Instagram with 100 views coming real soon.
Whoa, 100 views?
Yeah, 100 views. Bro.
Oh, that's amazing.
If you're listening now, you can be 101. Let's go.
Oh, nice. And, you know, there might be 2 videos by the time this podcast launches.
Exactly.
Because who knows when it's coming out?
105 between them.
Oh, nice. Hashtag
dream big. Dream big.
You got to dream big. It's unrealistic for me. 105? I barely hit 5. But that's fine. It's not about the views. It's about the content. And by Jove, there's some great content there. And much like this podcast, which I think we're at a really good place to end it. I feel like I've really enjoyed it. I feel like we delved into your creative process quite well there. And also the industry as a whole, which is what I wanted to do. In my notes when I was writing about this, I was like, I want to talk about the creative process, I want to talk about their industry, how you got there, which we didn't touch on how you really got there, but it seems like it kind of all started with like the stand-up comedian stuff, and you went to university for this kind of stuff. And I just, I think it's really interesting and exciting, and hopefully those who are listening are also thinking the same. Well, like, that was a really good ride, and they're glad that they're here. And maybe they want to find out more about you, Johnny, and where would they go to do that, do you reckon?
You can jump on my socials at Johnny I Cochrane, JohnnyICochrane. That's on Instagram and Twitter. No one uses Snapchat anymore, do they? So
I think Snapchat's dead, but everyone keeps telling me it's not. But it definitely is, right?
I no longer use it, only for catching up on Premier League action on the weekend.
No,
so
I think it's dead. I wouldn't worry about the Snapchat one. I'd leave that one.
You got the others, guys. So yeah, if you want to follow me, let's do that.
Do you know how long it took me to work out how to pronounce your last name when I was like prepping this?
Really?
A lot of time. I'm quite dyslexic as well.
Oh,
So
okay.
I read it with the R, like.
Just stop me in the middle of a joke then about you. Just about to. Yeah, because I'm dyslexic. Oh, yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah, no. Yeah, Cochrane. What were you?
Oh, I for some reason I read it as the R being like at the beginning, so I thought it was like Cochrane. I don't know.
Cochrane.
I wrote it in phonetic spellings, which is quite funny. I thought.
Oh,
It's just
I've had
Cochrane.
that my whole life. Yeah.
But I had to do that just to prep myself, just in case I forgot again.
There's a bunch of people who choose to still, at this stage of my life, spell my name Cock.
Wow, that's just very rude, isn't
It's
it?
playground humour, and I have had enough.
No one's laughing.
Yeah.
No. I did laugh when I did it, but playground humor is my favourite still. Listen, it's been a pleasure, Johnny. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope everything goes well. Maybe we'll have you back if season 2 gets lifted.
Nice one. Thanks, guys.
And there it was. Hopefully you enjoyed that conversation. I really enjoyed just having it. I thought it was really interesting. Hopefully it came across well. Hopefully it translated well. Hopefully you've got more of an insight into that creative process, into the comedic industry and whatnot. If you enjoyed this, I mentioned this earlier, but please, it's going to help so much, especially during this pilot season, if you give that like a 5-star and the rating. Maybe you share it on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever you want to do. Push it out there, share it to your friends, ask them to give it a little listen, especially if they're like a budding comedian or they want to get into this kind of industry. It could be really interesting, could be helpful maybe. That would be so useful to me, especially for this pilot. And also that 5-star rating, man. Got to get that 5-star rating, get me up in those algorithms. I don't know what's next. I'm doing all of these podcasts out of order, but we are going to have another guest on next week. Hopefully its conversation is going to be just as thrilling and entertaining. I have no doubt it will be. I'm looking forward to it. So have a fantastic week. Continue just being incredible, whatever you're doing, whenever you're doing it, however you're doing it. I don't mind. Just make sure you do a goddamn job at it. And I will see you very soon. Peace.